Good evening and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Here's a look at what's coming up. Senate leaders are trying to entice Republicans to vote for Ukraine aid by tying it to border security and immigration reform. What kind of deal is a bipartisan group of senators working on, and how will the GOP-led House handle it? FBI agents seizing the phone and iPad of New York City Mayor Eric Adams. This appears to be a part of an ongoing corruption investigation. We'll have the details. And do Democrats stand behind President Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war? A new poll now giving more insight on how the party feels about the issue. We'll have the numbers. Tying Ukraine funding to border and immigration reform. A bit of a political gymnastics going on in the U.S. Senate right now, as Senate leaders are hopeful that by linking the two issues, the chamber will get the votes needed to fulfill a request from the White House to fund aid to Israel, Ukraine, and the U.S. border. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports.
A bipartisan effort is underway here in the Senate to reduce the number of illegal immigrant crossings at the border. At the heart of this deal is an effort to make changes to asylum policy, which is something that senators from both sides of the aisle have expressed openness to. But this is not a standalone effort. The goal here is to combine this with funding to Ukraine and Israel after Senate leaders earlier this week expressed the reality that Ukraine aid is dependent upon changes at the border.
And I think it will be difficult to get the package across the floor in the Senate without a credible border solution.
The good news is there are some Republicans, we believe, who do want to get Ukraine done. In fact, a majority of this body wants to get Ukraine done, and who are willing to talk about a true bipartisan deal on border. We're not going to get everything we like. They're not going to get everything they like.
Democrat Senators Murphy and Bennett and Republicans Lankford and Tillis and others who are involved in these talks do have a limited window of opportunity to get this done. But there is the reality, the fact that border security and immigration reform are touchy, highly partisan topics here on Capitol Hill. And we see that from the fact that Congress has not been able to pass any immigration reform since 1996. Now, with this new effort of trying to tie it to Ukraine aid, it could go one of two ways. It could provide for more urgency on the issue to get it done quicker, or it could have the opposite effect and actually drag out the time it takes to garner the support needed for Ukraine. And then there's the bigger question of how the Republican-led House under its new leadership would handle such a deal. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
And FBI agents have seized the phone and iPad from New York City Mayor Eric Adams. The New York City mayor's attorney confirming this just a short while ago. This is part of an investigation into his campaign fundraising. It came days after federal agents searched the home of Adams's top campaign fundraiser. That search prompted the mayor to cancel a planned trip to meet with White House officials in Washington, D.C. The mayor says he has nothing to hide and expects his staff to comply with any type of probe. His campaign attorney says Adams has not been accused of any wrongdoing. He says the mayor's team discovered an individual had acted improperly and that they proactively reached out to investigators. We will be sure to follow this and bring you any developments. And Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen outlining U.S. trade ties with China. This ahead of the meeting between President Biden and Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more from San Francisco.
Here in San Francisco, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has been for the past 2 days holding in-person talks with China's top economic official, China's Vice Premier He Lifeng. Yellen says she emphasized the importance of responsibly managing the U.S.-China economic relation, but adding that the U.S. has no desire to decouple from China economically. However, Yellen also expressed concerns over China's unfair trade practices, including ones that she says will prevent American companies from competing on a level playing field. Here's what Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen told us at a press conference here earlier today. Watch.
But a healthy economic requires American workers and firms to be treated fairly. I raise about the breadth and depth PRC's non-market policies and practices and their goovers.
And Secretary Yellen also stressed to China's vice premier that companies must not provide material support to Russia's war efforts. Yellen says that despite U.S. sanctions already in place, including ones targeting some Chinese companies, equipment is still being delivered to Russia, evading U.S. sanctions. The two also talked about China's economy, which is facing woes, including a real estate property sector crisis, as well as slowing growth overall. And President Biden has repeatedly called out China's economic issues, calling it a ticking time bomb. It remains to be seen how President Biden would address such concerns during the upcoming APEC summit here in San Francisco. Reporting in San Francisco, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Guam, a small but strategic territory in the Western Pacific with great military and geographic significance. Congressman James Moylan, who represents the island in the House, spoke with us about the threats and challenges facing that territory and how the U.S. can defend it. Congressman James Moylan, thank you for taking a moment with us.
Oh, you were very welcome, and I just want to greet you with a warm Hafa. That's how we give our greetings from Guam, where America's Day begins.
Oh, thank you so much. And on that note, Guam is actually a very strategic and important place for the United States, part of the United States. So if you could tell us, what is particularly concerning to you in terms of China's influence in the Indo-Pacific, especially as a representative of Guam?
It's very concerning for us. The Indo-PACOM situation is our largest threat for the United States, for the nation, and especially for Guam because of our strategic location. Brief history about Guam. We're used to many conflicts. Guam was occupied for over 300 years by Spanish, right? Then the U.S.-Spanish War, then the U.S. came on in. So then we had a good relationship with the United States until World War II, when Japan bombed Guam, occupied Guam for about 3 years. Then we were liberated by the United States, but we were bombed again. And that's been around 79 years of our liberation of Guam from Japan. And since that time, now we're looking at Indo-PACOM with the Communist Chinese Party. So we're very familiar with wars and conflicts, occupation of our island. And since Guam is so strategically located, especially in the Pacific area, we have assisted in the Vietnam War for the United States, using that as a launching pad, and also the Korean War. And now it's the defense of the nation with Indo-PACOM and China.
Speaking of the Korean War, right now is the 70-year anniversary of the end of that war, where America got involved to preserve South Korea from evolving into the grips of communism. So how important is that mission right now as China, maybe not with bombs, but with ideology, is slowly creeping their way even into American society, but especially in Asia?
Very important, and there were many local folks from Guam that did join the military service in fighting for the country in the Korean War and the Vietnam War as well. And Guam has the highest per capita enlisted members in armed services in the whole nation. So we are very patriotic to the U.S. We understand the defense of the nation is also the defense of Guam. Strategic location, again, from China, we're 1,900 miles away from China. From Taiwan, we're 1,700 miles away from Taiwan. From Philippines, 1,600, and Japan, 1,200. But from the U.S. point of view, to get to California, we're 6,000 miles away from California. Mm-hmm. It takes you about 15 so hours to get on a plane, on a jet plane, to get to the U.S. That's why the strategic location for Guam, of Guam, with the United States is that important. And that's why we're having this military buildup now on the island of Guam.
How do you evaluate the U.S.'s current policy when it comes to China's aggression with Taiwan and also the China Sea?
Yeah, what's happening in the Philippines, where they're crashing their boats there, creating their own islands, that's totally wrong. Where they're extending their line of distance from, it is totally wrong as well. They're just saying this belongs to us. No, it does not. Right? So it's a matter of us building our alliance with our fellow nations, Japan, Philippines, Taiwan, keeping that alliance strong, to include the Free Associated States of Micronesia, FSM, Marshall Islands as well, Ponape as well. This relationship has to maintain a strong tie. Recently, I introduced a House resolution to bond the United States and the Philippines even stronger, to say we're just not there to be a military base. We're there in support of the Philippines. We're there in the economic building of the Philippines. And Philippines and Guam, we have a good relationship as well. A lot of our workforce comes from the Philippines in the buildup that is necessary for us to have to complete the Marine Corps barracks that is being built on Guam. A Marine Corps barracks hasn't been built in over 75 years in the United States, and one is being built on Guam, where 4,000 Marines are coming on over to make that a permanent station for them. We're also expanding the much needed missile defense. It's called 360-degree missile defense of the island. That's the Army, another 4,000 troops coming on over for that purpose. Because we know the Communist Party, China, has these missile capabilities, and they're targeting Guam, because that's U.S. soil. And they're going to knock, if we don't protect our nation from Guam, they're going to knock us out. That's going to give them a lot of strength. But we are going to defend the island through the National Defense Authorization Act, the increase in budget for the missile defense, the continuing budget for the Marine Corps there too, and in support with our alliance with our other nations that are also wanting to continue to deter the Communist Chinese Party. What happened in the past, World War II, should not happen again. And as long as we build our nations together in peace and building the economy, that's going to deter China.
Congressman James Moylan, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And President Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war appears to be losing him some support among Democrats. This according to a new poll released by the Associated Press today. Almost half of Democrats disapprove of how Biden is handling the Israel-Hamas war. 50% say they approve of how Biden has navigated the conflict, while 46% disapprove. This is down from 57% approval just a month earlier. Biden has maintained a hard line about Israel's right to defend itself after Hamas terrorists killed 1,400 Israelis last month. But he's also consistently pressured for aid and humanitarian pauses for civilians in Gaza. Out of those who disapprove of Biden's handling, 65% say he's too supportive of Israel, and over 50% say Israel has a lot of responsibility for the conflict. That's about 25% of total Democrats surveyed.